Well, hello, and love that intro, and thank you to the studio. So great, and welcome to another show of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott, and a big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. And whoever you are, wherever you are watching, and on whatever medium you are watching. So we've got another show for you today, and it's going to be a good one. We've got a fantastic guest who I'll be introducing in a minute, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. And wonderful to have you with us. And you can find us, of course, on YouTube. And if you just search Unprecedented TV, you will find us. And if you could give us a cheeky subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. And of course, this goes out on the usual socials as well. So the format, as ever, is a short introduction from me. And then we get our guest and we look into some of the topical stories of the day from the newspapers. We go out and buy the newspapers so you don't have to, and we look through them and we get a bit of a range: the Guardian, the Mirror, the Telegraph, the Mail, try to get a bit of a broad spectrum of stories, and we get into the stories behind the headlines, and we always try and end on a bit of a humorous, bit of a light-hearted one. And actually today we've got an absolute cracker. I mean, if you made it up, nobody would believe you about the final story that we've got. So one constant theme of this show is, where is Britain? And I think for the first time in a long time, I am starting to not just be worried about our government. I mean, that is almost a given these days, whoever's in. But I'm actually starting to be, and I'm far from the only one, starting to be actually seriously worried about the state of our country and where we are going. So a constant theme of this show is how much Britain has going for it. But yet what a bad state we're in. And the bad state, and alongside the many advantages and pluses that we have, makes our bad state all the more infuriating, all the more unacceptable. And where we are today, I fear, is we're becoming a country that is increasingly difficult to govern. I won't say impossible, but becoming difficult to govern, fractious. I think we're a less cohesive, less trusting society. We're becoming a post-Christian society, and we had 14 years of the useless Tories, which have paved the way for the worse than useless Labour. So where are we? Over-borrowed, overspent, overtaxed. The economy is flatlining, low productivity. Immigration is way too high. The government are telling us, we're getting net immigration down, i.e. people coming in minus people leaving. Well, the only reason that net immigration is coming down is because so many people are leaving the country. Very, very worrying trends indeed. But on the plus side, Britain still has an awful lot going for us. We've got a fantastic history and heritage. We have more globally top-rated universities than the rest of Europe put together. And we have, folks, the English language. We take that for granted, but actually it's a great plus. So Britain is still very much in the game. We still punch above our weight, and we're not finished yet. Britain is still worth fighting for. Okay, enough from me. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest for today, who will be joining us now, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, historian, author, and specialist on Russia and the Soviet Union. Marcus, great to have you with us. I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Tim, for having me on your show. And I'm very much looking forward to discussing what is happening in the United Kingdom.
Well, indeed. And I know many of our viewers will be similarly concerned. What have you been up to, Marcus? I know, you've got a great record of study. You're a PhD. That's why you're a doctor. And but recently, what have you been up to? What's been sort of concerning you more recently?
Well, on the one hand, I'm currently writing a manuscript for a new book. And on the other hand, I'm giving television interviews, podcast interviews, and lamenting at the catastrophic events which are occurring not just in Britain, but in the rest of the Western world, and which have horrific consequences for Western nations and Western civilization.
Yeah. As I said, I'm really starting to get worried now. And I know you've been a bit of an advocate on some of these good issues. I mean, let's start with something I know that you've been talking about recently on your Twitter X account, which is this idea, and I know that this is addressed by Douglas Murray in his book, The Strange Death of Europe, about this idea that we've got to have large-scale immigration to do the jobs that Brits don't want to do. And I noticed in The Guardian recently, couldn't help noticing George Monbiot is saying Europe must have more immigration. And he rightly highlights Europe's catastrophically falling birth rate. But we must have even more immigration into Europe and into Britain. I mean, as if we haven't had loads already. But on that specific topic, what were you thinking about, Marcus, with this idea that we've got to have much more immigration to allegedly to do the jobs that Brits don't want to do?
Well, first of all, it needs to be said that every country in the world has its idle people. That's always been the case, always will be the case. Nonetheless, it is a myth that there are jobs in Britain which Britons do not want to do, which Britons feel are, quote, below them. And who is telling us this? The CBI? Well, the CBI is not independent nor impartial. Politicians are simply puppets, useful idiots. Mainstream media is neither free nor independent. When, Tim, you get out there and you go to towns, cities, and also villages and hamlets across the UK, you will not find employers saying that we can't find British people to do this job. We can't find British people to do that job. The British ruling elite, or the British deep state, created this myth many decades ago as a way of justifying mass immigration to the United Kingdom. And of course, we see the same argument being wheeled out in the rest of the Western world, such as in France, Germany, America, and Australia. The reality is that Britain, England, and then Britain, for hundreds of years, over many centuries, was the leading country in the world concerning, for example, industry. Don't tell me that all of a sudden the British people are not good enough when it comes to industry, or not good enough when it comes to medicine.
And Marcus, we during the times that you talk about, we had relatively modest and reasonable levels of migration. It's only really in the last 20 years that we've had these rather large numbers.
Yes, indeed. And I believe there is a very sinister ideological factor at play. I believe that the British ruling elites, the Western ruling elites as a whole, hate the Western nations. They hate our culture, they hate our religion, Christianity, and they hate our history. Why else would a ruling elite attempt to destroy a race's culture and replace it with multiculturalism? That's hardly evidence of a ruling elite who love their people, who love their culture. Because if you love your people, you love your culture. It's as simple as that. But there's also another dimension to this. I believe that this form of capitalism, and I use the word in a very loose way, I should probably describe it as oligarchic capitalism, is in very serious trouble. So I think whilst there's an ideological factor at play when it comes to mass immigration, I believe the British ruling elites and the Western ruling elites as a whole are attempting to bring in as much cheap labor as possible in order to ensure that this oligarchic capitalist system does not fall from power.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the form of capitalism or free enterprise we have at the minute, I mean, it's not a pure competitive form. And I think some of the criticisms from the left, I mean, I went to a debate recently at the London School of Economics, and they had Gary Stevenson, a critic of the wealthy and the rich. And I wouldn't agree with everything that he says, but I mean, he puts his case very well. And I think some of the criticism of the current form of capitalism that we have is not entirely wide of the mark. Marcus. Thank you for those comments. Well, let's move on to our first press story. And this is from the Times. Actually, I'm finding the Times quite good these days. And I think I quite like the tabloid format. It makes it actually quite easy to read. So our first story, and we must crack on because time marches on. But this is from the Times. Overcrowded jails could breach ECHR, Britain told. Britain is at danger of breaching its obligations to prevent inhuman, degrading treatment because of poor treatment of people in care homes, autistic patients and prisoners and detained migrants, a watchdog has said. The annual report of the National Preventative Mechanism, that's another one of our 444 quangos that I've never heard of, says we must do far more to meet our commitments under the European Convention of Human Rights. Just generally, Marcus, what's your feeling on Britain's membership of the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, Tim, I'm bewildered. If Britain is independent and sovereign, then surely our Supreme Court is supreme on British soil. Of course, the dark reality is that Britain is neither independent nor sovereign. I have neither the time nor day for the European Court of Human Rights. And my suggestion is this when it comes to overcrowding in British prisons. First of all, deport each and every foreign national who is serving time in a British prison, irrespective of the crime they have committed. Secondly, introduce a severe criminal justice system, which is backed up by a stern police force. And thirdly, turn prisons in Britain into Victorian-style prisons. I believe, Tim, that my three suggestions would not only reduce overcrowding in British prisons, but would do a great deal to restoring safety and security to the British people when not only are they in their homes, but when they are out and about, for example, traveling on buses and trains.
So you think we need a police force, not a police service?
I believe we need a dedicated, professional, competent, and stern police force. A police force exists to protect the public, not to dance in parades, not to give the time, not to give directions, to protect the public, especially women and children. So that is why I say that prisons need to be overhauled, and so does the entire police force of the United Kingdom.
Yes. A quick comment on trial by jury, Marcus. What are you thinking there?
Well, the puppet Lammy was instructed by the British ruling elite to introduce that. And it is part and parcel of the British state or the British ruling elite giving more and more power to itself. This has been going on ever since, in particular, since the early 2000s. And 2030 is fast approaching. It's 4 years away. That is why we are seeing all of a sudden an escalation in this war which the British ruling elite is waging against us.
Now, Keir Starmer says he's against it. What do you think? You don't believe him? How could you not believe Keir Starmer?
Keir Starmer is not only a puppet, but he's also a pathological liar. He has said this as a way of trying to appeal to the British people, as a way of trying to say, I'm on your side, I have reservations, but the reality, Tim, is that it will be introduced. And he's the Prime Minister. Apparently, the Prime Minister is in control. The reality is that in monarchic Britain, the Prime Minister is simply the facilitator. At the heart of the British ruling elite is first and foremost the monarchy, followed by the aristocracy, then banking elites, financial elites, media barons, and so on and so on. So if he is against what the puppet Lammy has said, the puppet Lammy can be overruled. But of course, it won't be overruled.
Yeah, you think juries are done for. Have you I'm just out of interest, really. Have you ever been on a jury? I haven't. I think it's a great system, although it does produce it can produce some perverse verdicts, like the Bristol statue that was torn down and all that sort of thing. But have you been on a jury?
I have indeed. I've served on a jury twice. I fully support the concept and existence of a jury. Does it have weaknesses? Yes, of course it does.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you have one person deciding, then there is a lot of risk that comes with that. But then the judicial system in Britain has been infiltrated, subverted, and wielded as a weapon against the British people. So every aspect of life in Britain, every key institution in Britain has been infiltrated, subverted, and wielded as a weapon. And I have to say this very quickly, Tim, that for many years now, long before the COVID story of 2020, I said that Britain is dead. And at the time, people said I was unpatriotic, which I'm not. Some people said I'm pessimistic, which I'm not. I am brutally realistic. Britain is dead. There is nothing normal about this country. But the British people are still in existence, and the British people still have an opportunity to prevail and to build a new Britain and to resurrect the good, the fantastic elements of the Britain that was systematically killed by the British ruling elites.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier, yeah, I'm very concerned about the future of our country. I wouldn't say we're dead, but I think it's going to take some turning round. And I do worry, really seriously worry about the future of our country. I wouldn't say we're dead, though, but I think it's going to take quite a long time to turn round. And there's a lot of concern there, Marcus. Okay, let's go to our next story. And you and I might slightly differ on this, Marcus, but that's fine. This is from the Daily Mirror. Prepare for war. NATO chief's Russia warning as sub is tracked in Channel. NATO chief Mark Rutte, former Prime Minister of Belgium, Holland, has told the West to prepare for war like our grandparents endured. Well, I don't think it can be that bad, surely. Even if I would share some of his concerns. His warnings come as a Russian submarine was shadowed by the Royal Navy. Now, I would just point something out. That photograph there, you can see the Russian submarine bottom left. Of course, they're entitled to come through. The British ship that is following it is in the background. That is not a warship. That is a tanker. I looked it up. That is actually RFA Tide Surge, Royal Fleet Auxiliary Tide Surge. We don't even have we have so few warships, have we now, that we have to send a tanker out to follow Russian submarines. What are your thoughts on this, Marcus? Should we be preparing for war? And even if we should, are we ready for it?
Well, first of all, Mark Rutte is simply a voice box. He has no powers whatsoever. He simply reads from a prepared script. As regards this allegation that Russia is preparing for war, well, I say to the Western ruling elites, be it the British element, the American element, or the European Union element, go to the United Nations and put forward tangible evidence supported by concrete evidence that Russia is preparing to invade Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, and Britain. Where is the evidence? A Russian vessel was traveling in international waters in the English Channel. So, British vessels travel in international waters in the Barents Sea and in the Black Sea. So, where is the evidence that Russia is a threat to the security of Europe or the
invasion of Ukraine, Marcus, perhaps?
So, nearly 20 years ago, Tim, I was warning in opinion pieces in newspapers that there would be a war in Ukraine. I said that because of NATO's expansionist and criminal nature, which it demonstrated in 1999 when it illegally bombed the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which not only breached international law, it breached Article 1 of NATO's own founding treaty, which stipulates clearly, quote, NATO will never use force to resolve a dispute. So as a result of NATO attempting to enclose the Russian Federation on its western borders, Russia would act. I said that, Tim, nearly 20 years ago.
Interesting.
People do not understand Ukraine. People don't understand that Ukraine artificially was born in 1991 against the wishes of the population of what was then the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. You will only find anti-Russian sentiment in the westernmost part of Ukraine, which is historically known as Eastern Galicia, because there is a lot of Austrian, Polish, Lithuanian and Hungarian blood. And most of the population there is Catholic, as opposed to Russian Orthodox. So there are cultural and national security reasons as to why the Russians entered Ukraine. But again, if British mainstream media has evidence that Russia intends to invade Britain, present it. Let's see it. But Tim, they never do, because they do not have evidence.
Yeah, I don't think, we're about to face a Russian invasion, Marcus, or that, Russian troops are going to march down Whitehall with snow on their boots. But I do think, I do worry about Russian, what you might call the grey zone conflict, cyber attacks, the Salisbury poisonings, that kind of thing, and which I think operates more at the fringes. And I do worry, and I've worried about this for ages, long before Russia invaded Ukraine, that our armed forces are being run down. I'm ex-army myself, and are, just as a more general comment, really not just related to Russia, our armed forces are being run down to a state where they're very, very, very low. I mean, just really briefly, Marcus, on a more general point, I mean, do you share a concern about our depleted armed forces?
Not vis-a-vis Russia, no. My concern is the British ruling elite who have gone to war against the British people. I don't see Russia flooding Britain with immigrants. I don't see Russia decimating British culture. I don't see Russia decimating our religion, Christianity. I don't see Russia taking to the Canterbury Cathedral and putting graffiti on the walls of a church, sacred soul. I don't see Russia doing that. My concern is only the British ruling elite. As regards the British armed forces, well, that is part and parcel of destroying what is Britain, or what was known as Britain. If there is a threat, if there is a real threat, why would you continue to degrade the British armed forces and diminish in number the British armed forces? It's that simple. But of course, there is a reason for this. And part of it is ritual humiliation for the British people. We are being humiliated by the people who rule us. And the people who rule us are not abroad, they're at home. And if we want to talk about what's been happening in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union since the end of the Soviet Union in 1991, then there is a litany of cases that can be brought up against the British ruling elite and the American ruling elite. For example, expanding NATO to the western borders of the Russian Federation, which was told to the idiot Gorbachev in 1990 would not happen if the Soviet Union consented to East Germany and West Germany reuniting. So there is a very, very large story to be told. And quite frankly, there are very few people in Britain who have any idea about Russia or Ukraine. Indeed, some years ago, I was on television, Tim, I'll be very, very quick, and presented to me were 3 scholars who purported to be experts on Ukraine, whatever that means. And I said, okay, if you are experts, tell me the significance of the year 1654, the Treaty of Pereyaslav, and Bogdan Khmelnytsky. The presenter said to these 3 gentlemen, over to you. Literally, Tim, and it's on my YouTube channel, there was silence. One of them turned around eventually and said, well, I don't care about a dusty old treaty, which is 300 years old. The point is this, Tim, there are very few people who know about Ukraine. They know nothing about its history, but then they don't have to. Their job is to put out propaganda, and they are paid handsomely for doing so.
Okay, we need to move on. Marcus, thank you. I mean, I think I'm a bit more concerned about Russia than you are, but I think I do acknowledge this is an area that you've made a particular study and that you have a particular expertise on. Right. Last 2 stories, and we're going to have to be really quick. So probably just one sort of brief comment from each of us. So this one, I wasn't sure whether to put this down as the humorous one, but this is from The Sun. Landlord's message to Labour. You're barred. Hundreds of furious landlords are barring Keir Starmer and his Labour MPs from their boozers in protest at the sly budget tax grabs. Nearly 5,000 small pubs are set to be hit by business rates for the first time, putting their survival at risk. There's a little you can see the little logo there with the red sign. Apparently some pubs have already put it on the door. I think there's a bit of a triple whammy here, I think, with business rates, with the national insurance going up, with alcohol duty going up. Some of these pubs, Marcus, particularly having been through such a torrid time with COVID, I mean, some of these pubs, I don't even know how they're still carrying on.
Oh, my advice to pubs would be, instead of simply banning Labour MPs, why don't you ban MPs from the Uni Party? Because the Conservative Party have been just as destructive to Britain, to the British economy, to British culture, to Christianity. The Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, ban them all.
All MPs have a. I mean that could get some public support, you know, Marcus. Ban all MPs.
Ban the Uni Party. That's what I say.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I must say, I think I referred earlier to the useless Tories and the worse than useless Labour. I can see why they've particularly picked on Labour MPs. And I think, have you got a local, Marcus?
My local MP is now a Liberal Democrat. It was a Tory before.
Oh yes, you're in one of the seats that went Lib Dem. And have you got a local pub?
Oh, we have numerous pubs. Yes, I haven't. Not that I frequent on a regular basis pubs, but when I'm out and about, I will for sure look out for this badge.
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised actually to go recently to the old Cheshire Cheese in Fleet Street in London, and to be able to buy a pint for £6.80. And that's probably a sad comment these days that central London, that it's actually good news to be able to buy a pint in central London for £6.80. I mean, you know, there are pubs where you can pay £7, even up to £8 for a pint, which I think tells you something about that. Okay, so let's thank you, Marcus, and I think many of us would share our concerns. The smoking ban, I think, that has hit pubs as well. Okay, let's come to our final story. Now, as I said, I always try and put a sort of light-hearted one in at the end. And as I said at the top of the show, if you made this story up and wrote it, I mean, nobody would believe you. And this is the Peaky Blinders of Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, 4 young Afghan men have been dressing up as the Peaky Blinders. Now, the Peaky Blinders on the BBC, it's been on the BBC here, but I don't know whether they can get BBC One. I think it was on in Afghanistan, but it's also been on Netflix. So, you know, that's interesting that they managed to sort of get hold of the show in the first place. So they've been, and the interesting thing is they've been arrested by the Taliban for being un-Islamic. I wonder what sort of fate would you imagine awaits them, Marcus?
Well, I think that question should be probably put to the CIA chief and the MI6 chief. After all, when the Taliban came back to power a few years ago, days later, the CIA and MI6 chiefs flew to Afghanistan to sit down and talk with them. Why do I say that? Because the West never left Afghanistan. The West doesn't have to have a military force in a country in order to control it. It can control a country through controlling the civil service, through controlling NGOs, through controlling the economy. As regards to this story, I think it's a very sad story. I'm not at all surprised by it, but alas, there are some horrific people in existence in the world, and they are backed by the people who rule the Western world. So that is why I say the question should be put to the MI6 and CIA chiefs.
Okay, Marcus, I think very interesting. I think not everybody will agree with you, but you've got a considerable expertise on some of the subjects of which you talk, and I do really appreciate you coming on the show. Actually, it's been quite an education, I think, and I found some of the things you've said very interesting. So let's wind the show up there. Our thanks to the studio. Thanks to Marcus for coming on. And you can find us on YouTube, as I said. Search for Unprecedented TV. And if you can give us a cheeky subscribe, all the better. And we'll see you next time on Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching.